I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create freedom and impact in their life through success in B2B sales and the pursuit of self-development. Man, do we have an amazing guest. Josh Braun, the legend.
Who's on the show? Wait, who's this? Oh, me?
This guy named Josh Braun. I don't know if you know him, but you got to meet him. This guy has influenced my life in a profound way. He got me into meditation and mindfulness. I subscribe to his newsletter, and practically every day, every week, I'm just getting these gems on how to be more mindful, how to handle objections, be more effective in sales. And I downloaded his B2B sales objection flashcards. I think they're called the tongue-tied flashcards, which are linked in the description of this video. And it's been helping me approach objections from a place of mindfulness without forcing things, but just opening up conversation. So we're going to dig into those things. And by the way, guys, Josh is here and just tongue-in-cheek joking around. But Josh, thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate that you gave me a second chance because our live stream actually crashed last time. And we'll get more into that. But how's your day going so far?
Going well, man. Thanks so much for inviting me onto the show.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you. It's a privilege. It's an honor. And guys, if you get value out of this video, which I'm sure you will, make sure to give the like button a love tap, because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll show this video to more people who could benefit from the message. And check out some of Josh's resources linked in the description of this video. As I said, I bought his tongue-tied objection handling flashcards, and they've been really useful. And I subscribe to his newsletter. He's coming out with value every week. So Josh, let's just dive into it. We have an hour or so, and I have so many questions. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them, but super excited to dive in. Can you speak to how sales as a skill set has shaped your life and influenced it in a positive way?
I think no matter what job you're in or what you choose to do, you are in the business of selling. Sometimes it's just your ideas. If you're an employee working for an employer, and sometimes you have an idea that you want to implement in your company, you have to sell your idea. If you're in a relationship sometimes and you want to do something with your significant other, sometimes you have to sell your idea. Certainly if you have kids. So most situations that you're in daily life require you to sell ideas and also to be able to talk to people that have opposing ideas than you without making people defensive. So of course there's skills to help you sell software or products or services. But I think the skills of selling and, more importantly, listening and understanding go beyond selling software and making you actually a better all-around human in general.
I've noticed that on your LinkedIn, you said that you're teaching your wife sales. And I'm curious, what does that look like? Is that the key to a long-lasting relationship or what?
Yeah, so oftentimes she's the one teaching me. Yeah, so sometimes, I'm always looking for ways to teach sales concepts in ways that are informative, but also entertaining. So that's a concept that we came up with, got about 3 or 4 years ago when she was in a parking lot at Whole Foods and something came up and I'm like, let me just turn the camera on and have a discussion about it. And people seem to really like it, but it's very tongue in cheek. So these scenarios that'll pick up, sometimes I'll turn the camera on. She's a really good sport about it. Other times she'll turn the camera on me. And so it's just a fun thing that we do to teach, different sales lessons.
I actually had a guest named Glenn Lundy, and he went from homeless to a leader in the automotive car sales industry, that's an interesting space to sell in. And he said, Chris, my daughter has been selling, she's 2 years old, every day on watching a movie, doing this or that. And it seems that talking with folks like you who have been very successful in sales, that sales really is a natural thing. Do you feel like folks who what are your thoughts on people who say, sales is, I was going to say sales is salesy, but you get where I'm going. Sales is sleazy. They think of used car salesmen or women. What would you say to those folks who are very skeptical about why would I ever develop sales skills?
I'd say that they're right about that. I mean, my first experiences with sales messages were very negative. I mean, my first one was when I was like 7 or so. I loved comic books. And in these comic books were these ads, sales messages. One of them was for sea monkeys. And I was drawn into these ads, these sales messages, because they made very big promises. I mean, it looked like you pour water on these things and they grow up to be like 6 feet tall. You can train them. And I was going to train them to beat up my brother because he was picking on me at that age. And so I finally convinced my mom to help me send away for them and order them. And I saved up my money and I sent in, I think it was $1 or $2, whatever it was. And I'm waiting at the mailbox every day for these sea monkeys to come in. And lo and behold, one day they come in, I pour them in the water, and they're brine shrimp. They're like tiny, like a centimeter long. They die in like 2 weeks. They're certainly not 6 feet tall, and you certainly can't train them. And that was the first time that I was duped by a sales message, but it was not the last time. The next time was when I was 16 and I bought a car, and the salesperson wasn't transparent about the cost being built into the lease with regards to paint protection. And so we've all had these experiences that color our perception of what salespeople are. So you are justified to think that as a profession, it's not very trustworthy because of experiences that you've had. The other interesting dynamic about sales is that the best interest of the seller is not aligned with the buyer. Salespeople are paid to close deals, so oftentimes they put their best interests before the prospect. And so all of these stereotypes of traditional sellers is warranted, which is why I think a lot of people shy away from wanting to be in sales, and certainly are apprehensive and hold things close to their vest when they're around salespeople that are trying to sell them things.
What I noticed, Josh, is you just applied a concept that I've learned from you on objection handling. At least I think you did. I threw up an objection that, you know, salespeople are salesy or sleazy. And what you did is you didn't go against it, but you went in the same direction of the objection. You said, you're justified. Am I onto something? Was that something you just did there? Could you expand upon it?
Yeah, I do that a lot. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at the dog park, and I got into this discussion with someone who was commenting on my dog. I have a little red Cavapoo. And she said, where'd you get that
Ruby,
dog?
right?
Yeah, Ruby. Yeah, good. Did your research.
Yeah, I did.
But I said, I got the dog from a pet store. And this woman was so offended by that. She gave me a mini TED Talk on why I should not have got a dog from a pet store.
Yeah.
She was really quite angry. Now, the normal reaction when you hear a raging bull coming at you is to defend your decision, like a mother bear would defend its cubs. The problem is when you do that, when you sort of fight against people, they dig their heels in even deeper because you're challenging their core beliefs. So the idea here is to start from a place of understanding. You don't have to agree with it, but you can understand it and even make their case stronger. So what I said to her when she was coming at me like a raging bull is I said, you make a really good point. If more people adopted dogs, far fewer would be euthanized. And that's a factual statement. And she just leaned into that and she goes, yeah, and in addition to that, X, Y, and Z. And then I said, you really want to find dogs in forever home. You're really passionate about making sure that dogs and shelters are given a home. And we kind of went on like that for a while. And afterwards, she said, well, what's your reason for wanting to get a dog from a breeder? And she was much more open to my point of view. And I said something like this, well, how does it work when your family wants a very specific type of dog that you can't get from a shelter? One that is, red, one that's a Cavapoo, one that's hypoallergenic. And because I came from a place of understanding, she was much more empathetic. Because so what I did is I looked to see from the dog association, what are those breeders and pet stores where I'm making sure I'm not getting a dog from a puppy mill. So these are all the things that I did to make sure that I'm actually getting it from a reputable breeder. These dogs need adoption too. And she was much more open to it. It's the same thing with objections. Someone says your price is too high. The traditional sales approach is to defend the price. Well, a lot of people felt that way, but what they found was because we are the best in category, we have a 2x ROI within 2 years, rather than your price is too high. And you might simply say in a very calm way, sounds like you are comparing this to something you already bought or something that you're looking at. You want to make sure you are not spending your money or overpaying for something that you can get for far less money. It seems like there's a ceiling to what you want to pay. Seems like you've been shopping around a little bit a long time. Right. And so what you'll find when you sort of what I call join the resistance is there's no resistance because there's nothing to fight here. So anytime someone comes at you with a different political view, which happens a lot nowadays. I mean, I see it at dinner all the time. Someone has a different political view, even with the Palestine-Israel thing. This came up last night. Someone had a different view than me. I didn't push back. I said, it sounds like you read that somewhere. It sounds like you have a reason for saying that. Where'd you get that? Where'd that from? So the default is to understand without necessarily having to agree with. And what you'll find when you do develop that skill is when you make people feel heard, they're more likely to hear you.
So I noticed your hat says detach. And is that detachment at the root of your ability to not try and force and actually approach objections in this way? Could you speak to what that detach really means?
Yeah, so most salespeople go into conversations with intent to get a sale because that's how they're commissioned. That's how they get paid. So when I make a cold call, my intent is to book a meeting. When I'm on a discovery call, my intent is to move the thing off to the next step and close the sale, preferably by the end of the quarter. When I hear an objection, my intent is that I got to overcome it. So when your intent is to move things forward to get the result that you want, but when that's your intent going in, that's your mindset. What ends up happening is you say things that come across as pushy and manipulative because your thoughts affect what you say. It's biological. So it all starts with your intent. If your intent isn't to do that, if you detach from the outcome and seek to see if there might be a fit and be okay if there isn't, and you're sort of leaning back and you're indifferent, your behavior sounds more relaxed and chill, which is more appealing to prospects because they don't feel the push. I'll just give you a quick example. 3 days ago, I was called by a VP of sales who wanted to bring me in for some sales training. And he said, we're thinking about bringing you in. Why should we choose you over some of your other, sales trainers out there? And the traditional approach would be to go into your value proposition of why you're the best.
Yeah.
But if you're detached, you'd be a little curious. I said, hey, look, John, you've been an individual contributor, it looks like, for 14 years. And now you're leading a team. You guys have had year-over-year growth every year. Wouldn't it be easier and less expensive for you to do the training rather than bring in someone like me or some of these other people? I noticed you guys are also ramping up your team. You're in the middle of hiring. Why not just wait until they're onboarded before bringing in like an external resource? You guys also have a couple of different, you have 2 or 3 top performers you mentioned. What's your opinion, John, of using your top 2 or 3 performers to train the rest of your team?
Interesting.
So what I'm doing here is not as a mechanism to get anything, but I'm almost trying to talk people out of it. Like bringing in an external trainer is sort of a last resort in a sense. If someone can't defend Josh, we've tried all those things. We're at our wits' end. We don't know. If I can easily talk someone out of switching, they're probably not motivated really to switch, which is cool. If I can't talk them out of it, they maybe have struggled enough where they could use help. But my intent isn't to close everyone. My intent is to sort of lean back and understand and let people persuade themselves. So Josh, we've been looking at, John, you've been looking at like trainer A and B and C. What in the world would inspire you to consider a former kindergarten teacher? I have not trained the Salesforce team like some of these other trainers have. And then what happens is the prospect tells you their reasons why they're interested in you, which are much more powerful than you giving them your reasons. So it's an approach really based on inquiry versus making statements and trying to pitch people why you're the best. Because you can't tell people you're the best. You're biased. You have commission breath.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many places I want to spin off from this. That was really insightful. But what I'm taking away is that you're curious, you're detached, and you allow the customer to sell themselves. And you're doing what reminds me of the Sandler sales methodology when they talk about the negative reverse. I started out at Oracle. That's where I cut my teeth as an SDR. Are you familiar with the Sandler sales methodology? Did that ever shape your thinking? Because that reminds me exactly of the negative reverse. You pull away and they, like a pendulum, they swing closer to you.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Sandler. I've never gone through the training, but I want to be very clear. I'm not doing this to get anybody to swing back to me.
Okay.
This is where the intent really comes in. This is not a trick to try to get people to swing the pendulum back so that I can close a sale.
Okay.
My intent here is to actually detach from having expectations that there's a pendulum to swing back. I'm not trying to make things happen the way I want them to happen when I want them to happen. What I'm doing is I'm letting things happen the way they happen without really caring too much about where it goes. If they want to work with me, great. If not, that's cool too. I sort of have abundance. You know, I just give you another example. Whenever I get an inbound lead, which I got, 3 today, Josh, want to hire for the SKO.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, waste the prospect's time or mine. And I've shared this on LinkedIn. I send an email saying, hey, thanks for considering me. I know you have a lot of options out there. Here's 3 reasons why you might not want to work with me. 1, I don't sign NDAs or MSAs. I have a 1-page agreement. 2, I require payment upfront. Right. And 3, I don't have any availability until this date. And I think, people appreciate that honesty. And what happens is about 80% of the time, I never hear back from those people again, which is phenomenal. But the 20% that I do hear back from, 90% of those will end up converting at one point, or not. If they don't, that's okay too. So I don't really have, this is not an intent to use negative reversals. I'm not familiar exactly with what that is, but I'm kind of guessing. But this is not an intent to use a negative reversal to get something I want. So this is the big shift. I think a lot of this stuff can be used like this. Like I have to mirror someone to make it I have to use a no orientated question to get to yes. Would it be a terrible idea if we continue the conversation next week? The seller is trying to use a manipulative, no orientated question made popular by Chris Voss, who I really enjoy. But their intent is, their intent is I got to use the question to get what I want. This is not that. And I think that's the shift here.
No, that is a shift because if I'm honest with you in the audience, I 100% use these tools with my own interest in mind. If I do this negative reverse, it will actually swing to me. So I'm good. You caught me. I do that, but there's an opportunity for me and anyone else out there listening to truly detach, to take it to another level and throw that intention out the window, and maybe you use it. And so that actually is a breakthrough right there. Very good distinction and insight. I'm glad you pointed it out. Would you say that because you're like almost helping the customer or the prospect disqualify you, that those who do end up working with you, they really authentically want to, right? That's what my gut. But have you found that to be the case?
Well, look, people will buy for their reasons and on their timeline, not mine. I think the reason people work with me is because they have been following me for a while on LinkedIn, and they have been reading my content and philosophy, and they have developed a bond with my perspective. And it's very important to have a perspective. So detaching doesn't mean you are like, leaning back and letting, everything happening. You're not leading anything. So you have to shine a light on things for them to consider. So by way of example, in the sales training example, is the prospect said, hey, we're thinking about doing this training in-house using our managers. And I said, can I share some things for you to consider so that you can make that decision? They go, sure. I go, so often what I see when managers do training, because they don't have a degree in instructional design, is they will vomit PowerPoint presentations at new sailors. So you'll see these 60, 70, slide presentations. I call it sort of drinking by fire hose. How are you going about structuring the material in a way that can be digestible? Something else I see is that oftentimes people don't have instructional aids that they leave behind. Things like, a cold call talk track that's like affixed to the monitor. And so what ends up happening is sometimes the learning doesn't stick. What's your opinion about using aids, and are you guys incorporating that into your training? So we're asking questions that are illuminating potential, not problems, but potential problems in the current way. I had a general contractor do this to me just recently with my house. I said to him, you're not the cheapest option. And he said, I'm not. Can I ask you just a couple questions? I go, sure. Just so you're comparing apples to apples. Are they using Redgate as a moisture barrier for your floor? Are they using hollow doors or hollow doors? Or solid doors or hollow doors for the interior of your house? Are they using your existing 15-year plumbing, or are they giving you guys new copper pipes? So they're not pitching anything.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're illuminating potential problems that make you scratch your head and think, I'm not sure. And now I'm leaning forward and thinking, I don't know, let me look into that. Versus, let me tell you why I'm worth bringing in as a sales trainer. Let me tell you why I'm worth a general contractor. Of course, you're going to say that you're biased.
So I've been studying your work, and again, I've been implementing it to be more effective in cold calling and objection handling, cold emailing. And by the way, audience, we do have a live audience, by the way, and we got some comments. Thank you all for your time and attention showing up. This is a great conversation. We're going to get to more cold calling and objection handling, cold emailing. So stay for the whole conversation. But when it comes to cold calling, I noticed you use the poke the bear method, and you capture the individual's attention, the prospect's attention by, just correct me if I'm wrong, highlighting an expensive problem that they might not have thought about. Can you elaborate more on the poke the bear method? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, we'll just give you an example. So, and see if you can dissect what I'm doing here. So imagine for a second that your prospects wash their cars, like on the weekends. No matter what you sell, your prospect has a job they're trying to get done. So in this case, you have someone trying to wash their car. And no matter what you sell, people are getting the job done without you, no matter what you sell. Nobody's sitting around not using a bucket and sponge and all other kind of methods to wash their car. So the first thing we have to understand is, what job do people want to get done, and how are they getting it done today? From there, we have to have a hypothesis about the terrible, no good, very bad thing that happens if they keep using the current solution. So in this example, if someone is using one bucket and a sponge, the terrible thing that could happen is dirt can get trapped in the sponge because the dirt settles to the bottom of the bucket. It's almost like if you put salt in water, you stir it, the salt settles to the bottom. The problem is when the dirt and the grit get on the sponge and you put that on your car, you can scratch it. Now, let's say you have a solution for that. It's called a grit guard. It actually goes into the bucket. It's almost like a little cheese grater, and you can rub your sponge on it, and the dirt settles to the bottom of the bucket and off your car. Now, when you make a cold call, you could say something like this. So, Chris, I know you like to wash your car on the weekends. Are you using one bucket or two buckets? And you might say, well, I'm using one bucket. And then you could simply say this. Oftentimes what we see when people use one bucket is the dirt settles to the bottom of the bucket and can get trapped in their sponge, which can scratch their car. How are you making sure that never happens when you wash your car? And then I'm just going to shut the front door and I'm just going to listen without having expectations. Now, they may say, usually what you hear when you ask that question the right way and you nail it is you hear like a pause, because it's a hard question to answer. You're sort of poking the bear and they're like, I guess I just put it in the suds and hope the dirt comes off of it. Or what are you talking about? Like it's sort of a hard question. You're sort of making them think a little differently. And then from there, you might say, what's your opinion of a grit guard? And they might say, well, what is that? And now you've created an opening where they're leaning forward. Or they may say, yeah, I've heard of it. I just don't use it. To which you might say, sounds like you looked into it and the value wasn't there for you. Notice what we're not doing here. We're not pitching until someone says, well, what do you do? What are you selling? And then, and only then, we can give them a little teaser. Well, with the grit guard, it's a device you put in your bucket, and the dirt settles to the bottom of the bucket and off your car so you never scratch it. Well, how does that work? If you'd like, I can show you. Right? So we're not really, even when we're pitching, so to speak, we're giving a little tease. So we're creating curiosity. Your job is not to make cold calls. Your job is to pique curiosity. but it all starts with having a point of view as to the terrible, no good, very bad thing that happens if people continue washing their car with a bucket and sponge. And what I often see sellers do is pitching buckets to people that have buckets.
Yeah.
We have a better, shinier bucket. It's got more this, more that. And that's when you hear, I'm not interested. We have a vendor for that all the time, because you're selling solutions to people that already have solutions.
Mm. And guys, you know, speaking to the audience, this applies to SaaS sales, any type of cloud, you know, computing sales. And what's incredible is there's a guy, Alex Lee. I don't know if he's here today, but I worked with him. He reached out through the channel. He got a job at Snowflake. And guess who trained him there? Josh Braun, this guy right here. And so, Josh, I just think that's such a cool thing. And the fact that you're training at the best technology companies in the world, companies like Snowflake that folks in the audience are dreaming to get into, it's just amazing. And so I wanted to get your advice for these aspiring SDRs out there looking to break into tech sales, a couple nuggets on what they should focus on to hit the ground running when they're new to tech sales, they're new to being an SDR, if they actually want to be effective in the role.
Well, I'd first start by being very selective about what you're selling. A lot of people will go and work for companies like Snowflake because they think, oh my God, Snowflake is this awesome tech company. It's got a lot of buzz.
Sure.
I'm going to get options. I'm going to get an exit. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then what they find is they're not really excited about the product. They don't really understand the product. They're selling to data scientists.
Yeah.
And they're not really passionate about it. It's harder to work selling a product that you're not really passionate about. And there's so many products out there that you might be passionate about. I'm going to give you just a couple of examples. There's this place up the street from me called the Tin Muffin. It's like a lunch spot on Palmetto Park Road in Boca.
Make me hungry, man.
Yeah, well, so I went there and I had lunch. I think it was a turkey sandwich with my wife. Now, normally after the meal is done, the server will come up and say, do you want dessert? And I always say, no, I'm not a big dessert guy. But this server, I think her name was Debbie, actually. I might be wrong about that, but I think that was her name. She walked up to me and she said this, are you afraid of dessert? And I said, well, I'm not afraid of it. She goes, I do not like bananas, and I certainly don't like banana cake. But this banana cake that we have here is life-altering. I have 2 cats and 3 kids, and this is the best thing in my life. If you'd like, I could see if we have any left. Now, she was so confident and passionate about this banana cake that I said, bring it. And it was amazing, right? The point being that if you don't have to have that level of excitement, but you certainly can't be like, I want to go sell data science because of the company. So the first piece of advice would be to be very selective as to what it is that you want to sell and have some, passion for it. When I sold at Jellyvision, we were selling an unbelievable product that helped people understand their benefits in an entertaining way because employee benefits were so complicated. And when I saw this product, I'm like, oh my God, I understand benefits for the first time in my life. I had no idea what an HSA was or an HMO or deductibles. Like I was like 20 years old. I'm like, this is amazing. I was so excited about it. I couldn't wait to pick up the phone. Now that's at a level 10. Plus the guy who founded the company created a game called You Don't Know Jack that I played as a kid, and I was going to get to work for him. Like that was that's a 10. As opposed to like a CRM, right? That would maybe be like a 1. So be selective as number 1. And then number 2, once you're in the role, don't get product trained. Okay. Get problem trained. Meaning talk to customers and have them show you what their job is that they're trying to get done and how they were doing it before they used your product. I don't mean tell you, I mean show you. So many sellers can't communicate to me what life is like before you switch. So they use like very generic words like, well, it take a long time. It was really complex, but it's very fuzzy. When you can understand the terrible, no good, very bad way people were getting their job done, and you feel it viscerally, like what I call the infomercial. You see someone in a kitchen trying to slice tomatoes with a dull knife, and you see them slicing it, and the tomato splats all over the place, and they got to clean it all up, and they're embarrassed in front of their friends that come over. Like when you can feel it at a visceral level, and then see what changes for the better after they switch to your knife, that is going to give you so much more confidence, like that woman from the Tin Muffin when you make a call. So many companies do product training, but they don't do problem training. So you need problem before product. Everything gets easier the more you get to know your customers before state. And sellers spend maybe 5 or 10. This is not persona stuff. This is like show and tell.
Wow. Yeah. I should have talked to you before I started my career at Oracle, although I am grateful. It's been a great launch pad. But do you think I'm really that passionate about databases?
I don't know. I don't know.
But honestly, it was a great launch pad, and I got a lot of training, met good people, and it led me to this conversation with you. But it's cool to think looking forward, even for someone like me, 9 years in the space, to think come from a place of passion. And like that was such a great example of that woman who was so passionate about that. I think you said banana bread or cake.
Yeah.
By the way, so you mentioned you wanted those sea monkeys, right, to beat up your brother. You thought they were going to be huge. And Des, thanks for showing up. She said she actually had the same experience with sea monkeys. So that's hilarious. But I want to travel back in time and dig a little more into the origin story of Josh Braun. And I did my research, and I noticed you went to Florida State, which is funny because my best friend, or one of my childhood friends, was a bartender at Potts. He was Delta Tau Delta, and I'm sure things might have changed, but when you were at Florida State. But I'm curious, like, what was your experience there, and how did college shape you? Because some folks get into sales with it, they don't need a college education, but just what was your experience, and how did your time at Florida State shape you?
I don't think it did. Really, I just was at school there. It was a state school. It was easy to go to, but I don't think it shaped me in any way. I had some good experiences there. I met some interesting people. I got into like videography. I would film the football team,
cool.
But I don't think it shaped me from a sales or business perspective at all. I think from that point of view, it was quite frankly a waste of time. And I think it is for many people. I don't think college is necessary, certainly, to go into sales. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, some of these professions you need school for. But I see so many people that want to be a video editor, or they want to go into sales, and they think they have to go to college to go to sales. And I just don't think that's the case. It's very expensive. You have to go into debt to do it. So many of the best salespeople that I know were like just working, like they were bartenders, they had trades. And they just excel at sales. I'm not saying it's a negative necessarily, but it certainly doesn't have to be something that you go to that shapes you in any way. That wasn't the case for me, at least.
What's cool is that actually is a really encouraging commentary, because a lot of folks who follow this channel or who are out there trying to break into tech sales, the top thing they look at is how do you break in with no experience or without a college degree. So in fact, that's extremely encouraging to the folks out there that you don't need a fancy college degree to get into sales and do really well for yourself. Now, you mentioned videography, and I think I saw that you ended up working at Nickelodeon for Clarissa Tells It All or something like that. And was that another thing that, like I saw it was hilarious that you probably tongue in cheek, you cut fruit and serve fruit, but did that shape you at all? Or was that another like thing just that, along your journey that was like, I just tried it out?
I wouldn't say that it shaped me, but it did teach me that I really enjoyed working and teaching. So what I did I did this called craft services. So I did, cut fruit for the talent, but in between them filming, I would tutor the kids in their schoolwork, because a lot of them, like Melissa Hart, would need like practice and teaching. And so I would teach them. And I realized that I do like to teach. I never thought I'd be teaching sales, which I'm doing now, but it turns out that teaching and selling are pretty linked, as well as entertaining and storytelling. So I learned a little bit about storytelling at Nickelodeon and teaching. I think any experience that you have along the way leaves an imprint on you. Sometimes it's, I don't want to do that. Other times it's like, but you always kind of take something a little bit out of it, even though you might not know exactly what it is at the time.
Yeah, it's amazing how every experience shapes that tapestry of our life. And sometimes it's like a knot. But I heard a metaphor how like life is like a tapestry. On the back, it's chaotic and full of knots, but the knots shape the beautiful image on the front. And like you said, sometimes you learn what you don't like. But at the Palm Beach County School District, I think I'm getting that right, you're an elementary school teacher. And I noticed storytelling was on your description. And this is the last piece of the Josh Braun origin story here, and then we'll get more into objection handling again and things like that. But was storytelling one of the main things that teaching taught you that has served you in sales, or was there any other lessons you learned?
Storytelling is huge. I realized when I was teaching elementary school that without a story, you sound like Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You're sort of like talking at people. But as soon as you were to tell a second grader, once upon a time, I'm assuming that the kids were read to, and not all kids were read to, but assuming that the kids were read to when they were young, you see them all sort of like leaning forward a little bit, because we're all hardwired for story. Even in selling, stories are integral to helping people not only understand, but be motivated to want to learn more. So by way of example, if someone were to ask you what you do, most sellers would look like a deer in the headlights, and they would give a very Ben Stein description of what they do. And what ends up happening when you do that is you put people into like a sleep-induced coma. But if you know how to tell a story, when someone asks what you do, you might say something like this. So, John, I know you have a team of 7 SDRs. You know how when they pick up the phone and they make cold calls, even if you have direct dials, for every 50 calls, maybe if they're lucky, they have like 1 or 2 conversations. Most of the time, people just don't pick up. With our service, reps make the same 50 dials, but instead of having 1 or 2 conversations, they have 15 to 17 without you having to invest in any new technology. So that is a story-based approach for explaining what you do, versus we have developed a service that allows you to optimize your cold call to connect rate by at least 35%, which is how most people would answer that question without a story.
Yeah.
The stories are the things that suck you in. Even as someone who teaches sales, you'll notice even in this podcast, most of my answers start with a story, right? They all start with some kind of a story. It's the story that pulls you in. So knowing how to be a good storyteller, I think is a superpower, certainly for teaching and also for selling.
Yeah, no, that's something I'm grateful for in this interview, in this conversation right now, is I notice you're volunteering examples and I'm like, yes, please. Thank you. You know, I don't even have to ask. And so it's super helpful when you give the example of the dirt getting in the sponge is one of the, anecdotes that you shared. So super useful. And speaking of stories, I want to go into storytelling real quick, story time. Guys, for those of you who are live, I don't know if you saw, but Josh and I tried to go live once before. And I had, chase is an aggressive word, but I reached out to you over maybe 6 months even. You know, you're one of my dream guests. And we finally did it. You were dropping gems. And then, the internet crashes. I guess I had to reset my modem, and maybe I could have foreseen it, but you're gracious to reschedule. And after the fact, when I reached out, you sent me what was beautiful, like a poem. It was almost like Yoda giving advice to Luke, and I just wanted to read that to the audience and then get your perspective on it. Right. So I said, Josh, like something along the lines of, Josh, I am, embarrassed, and I prepared for this, and I'm so sorry I've disrespected your time. And you said this, Josh, it's pretty incredible. The nature of a dog park is barking dogs. If you go to a dog park expecting peace and quiet, you will be disappointed. The opposite is also true. The nature of live streams are tech glitches. You will never be disappointed if you move in harmony with the nature of the action. Let reality be reality. So can you walk us through what inspired this perspective? Because it definitely shaped me.
It's really grounded in Stoicism. And if you've done any work in mindfulness, Buddhist practices as well, but it's this idea that everything has a nature to it. Like, so for instance, I go swimming at a public pool in Boca. And if I were to go to that public pool expecting it to be peace and quiet while I swim, I'm going to be disappointed, because the nature of a public pool is kids, especially on the weekends, splashing around and being loud and throwing balls into your lane when you swim. That's just the nature of it. And so if you're expecting that not to happen, like some people swimming, they get annoyed when a kid's ball goes into their swim lane. Like they get angry at it, actually. And so because they're not moving in nature with it, they're going to be disappointed. But if you always move in harmony with the nature of the thing, then when that happens, you simply just take the ball and you put it back into the other lane where the kid is swimming. right? And so all things are like that. The nature of
Yeah.
live streams is sometimes there's a tech glitch. It's nothing you did about it. It just happens. The nature of sales is sometimes you will lose a deal.
Yep.
Sometimes you will get ghosted. Your territory will change. So the idea here is to just, again, let things happen the way they happen. It's not saying you're a pushover, of course not, but you're also not fighting against the nature of a thing. I mean, my mother-in-law is a great example.
Yeah.
She used to live like literally a mile away from here, and I would be on a live stream, and she would walk into the office while I was on a live stream, and she would say, how much money did you make last week? Like, now, that's a crazy thing. That's a crazy thing to say. But if you can just lean back for a little bit and see, like, okay, the nature of my mother-in-law is she, in her mind, not saying I agree with it, but in her mind, she wants to make sure her daughter is being taken care of. Right? So the nature of my mother-in-law is that's how she is. I just have to accept that. And so when she comes in, I go, you want to make sure your daughter is being taken care of. And then she just hugged me and like went away. Right? So this idea of sort of moving in harmony with the nature of things, like little, like kids. I have a great friend. He's got an expensive sports car.
Yeah.
And he told his kid to be careful. His car, it's in the garage. He actually told his kid not to go in the garage, but the kid was trying to drag his wagon out of the garage and scratched his car. It's a $100,000, sports car. Now, was he upset? Of course he was upset. It's an upsetting thing. I'm not saying you're not upset about it, but you're not going to stew on it for like months and months and months and months and months, because you're going to get it fixed. And you're going to realize that kids do things. That's the nature of being a kid, having a wagon. And so it really is a really great philosophy on how to live your life in a way of not getting what I call caught up in the caught upness of things.
It's just a funny coincidence because my dad walked in on a live stream a week ago when he was visiting me here in Austin, Texas. And, it's just helpful to understand your thinking and your beingness, how you approach things that go deeper than sales tactics and spills over into just the way you show up in life. And I'm curious, have you always been this way, or was there an inflection point where all of a sudden mindfulness became very important for you?
I've not always been this way. I've had to work and continue to work on this muscle. So like getting stronger in a gym, if you go to a gym and you work out once and then you go look in a mirror, you're probably not going to see much difference. Even if you go like 3 or 4 times, you're probably not going to see much difference. But if you go consistently year after year, you'll probably get in better shape. So I practice this daily, like brushing my teeth. I prioritize it. 10 minutes a morning, I do repetitions for the brain, to sort of, mindfulness training. I think we talked before the show. I use an app called Waking Up by Sam Harris. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. But it's a muscle to work at, and the superpower that it gives you with a lot of practice, and I am not a master at this at all, is that it allows you to think about your thoughts without reacting to your thoughts. So most people are unaware of their thoughts. They're just having these thoughts, which you don't control, and they're just reacting to them all the time. And sometimes you can stay in that state for like months, sometimes years. You're sort of angry, you're depressed, you're anxious. You don't even know why. Your thoughts affect how you feel. And being able to be aware of your thoughts and observe them, not to judge them, but just to look at them, to think about your thinking, gives you an opportunity to turn the volume down. Because then instead of reacting, you can look at that and say, what do I want to do? And you might do the same thing that you would normally do, but you now have a choice as to thinking to yourself, well, maybe I don't want to react that way. Maybe I want to do it this way. I'm not always perfect at this, but I have gotten to the point now where when I fly off the handle, I do realize it like an hour later, like, I didn't quiet down that time. I just reacted. But with practice, you create this gap between the thought and what you say. And in that gap is where the magic is. You could simply choose to say nothing. You can choose to let things be without having to have an opinion about anything. So someone says to you, you are absolutely crazy for moving to New York. It's so expensive there. Rather than justifying why you're moving, you could just say it is. It is expensive there.
Oh, yeah.
And you could just sort of let it go and let it be. You could sort of shift into this mode. So that's what it gives you. And I've been doing this now for, I want to say 4 or 5 years ish,
Mm.
practicing this, but I am by very no means, an expert in this. This is an ongoing, practice, much like karate or jujitsu or anything you want to get better at.
Yeah, and I just felt a little convicted in a good way. It wasn't even your intention in the fact that I justify. I want to take on the challenge, and maybe the audience might too, of not justifying and letting it be. It is, or it just accepting what someone says and not trying to prove otherwise and resist. So it's really cool that also you have humility and understand that I'm sure like sales too, mindfulness is a lifelong muscle to flex and there's always room to go deeper. But I appreciate that you shared some practical ways we can flex that muscle, which what I heard was the Sam Harris app, which I wanted to express gratitude to you that I've been doing it for 30 days. Thanks to you, you made that recommendation. And guys, to the audience members out there listening live, or those who see this in the future as it floats out into the evergreen YouTube sea, encourage you to check it out. So one other thing on mindfulness, and then we'll get to more cold calling and objection handling. And I want to manage the time because we have 14 minutes and I want to be respectful of it. But one more thing on mindfulness is, can we give an example to apply it to rejection? Right? Because we experience it in our personal life. We get rejected in sales, on cold calls, discovery calls. Maybe even we're pursuing a deal for a while and then it falls through. I'd love to get your thoughts on how we can apply this mindset to rejection.
So this just happened to me 2 days ago. So I had been courting someone that I wanted to have on my podcast. I won't mention her name, but I've been following her for several years. I read all of her books.
Yep.
And I reached out to her a couple of times, like you reached out to me, and she finally says, "Hey, I'll do it." It was like 4 months ago, she agreed to do it. And it was getting to the record date, which was like a couple of days ago. And I just sent her off an email to confirm as a formality, really, because she didn't cancel the meeting. And she wrote me back immediately. And she goes, "Hey, thanks for thinking of me for the podcast, but I've changed my mind. I don't want to do the podcast anymore."
Oh, man.
So I wrote her back and I said, "No problem. Is everything okay?" And she didn't respond. Right. And so that hurt. And the reason it hurts is because we are social creatures. If you kind of look at biologically, back in the prehistoric days, we couldn't really survive unless we were like with a group. And so when we're abandoned, that's kind of still in us. That feeling of abandonment is still there. So it sort of hurts. And so what you don't want to do is fight with that. What you want to do is observe that. So what I did in the spirit of mindfulness and said, "Oh, okay, let me see how I'm feeling about that." And I just observed my thoughts. I just thought about them. Well, that's interesting. I'm feeling this way. That's interesting. I'm feeling this way. How come I'm feeling that way? I don't really know her. Where's this coming from? And what you realize when you do that is pretty quickly you realize that the thought has a very short shelf life. All of a sudden you're thinking of a bike or chocolate or sushi or a guitar or whatever the next thing is that you don't control comes into your head. Where we get into trouble is where we ruminate on that. Yes. What did I do? I don't know if I even did anything. The idea here is to sort of tune out what you don't control, but not try to fight it. Is to just observe it and let it be. The reality of sales and the reality of scheduling guests on a podcast is sometimes people will agree and they will change your mind, and you don't have to know why. You don't have to understand it. If someone tells you, that's fine, but you could just be silent about it and just let it be, and rather than trying to make it be or ruminate on it. And it sort of turns the mind. Not saying that it doesn't hurt. Yeah. And of course it hurts. It stings a little bit. But the story that you tell yourself is, what did I do? Because stories can't be observed, right? That what did I do? Did I do something wrong? She must not like me. You can't observe that. What you can observe is the fact. The fact is she canceled. But the stories that you tell yourself are always negative because brains are negatively biased. And if you don't have control over your thoughts, you're not aware of it, and you're just a slave to your thoughts, what ends up happening is that is affecting your behavior and how you feel. So you think you did something wrong, and now you're in this sort of downward spiral for weeks or months or years, even if you don't have a mindfulness practice. Whereas if you have a mindfulness practice, you can simply drop back, not saying it doesn't hurt, of course, but you just observe it and you realize, I mean, honestly, until you brought it up, this is only a day ago, this is pretty fresh. I wasn't even thinking about it till you brought it up. Literally
Yeah.
Versus before, you would be like, I'm such a loser. What did I do? How can I get her back? That's a very egocentric thing that has to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. Just like a dog barking has nothing to do with you. Dogs barking because that's what dogs do. Maybe you startled the dog. Maybe it's how the dog was raised. It just is. Everything just is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that was such a good example, especially for me, because if you canceled on me, which I mean, I've learned how you would handle it. I would have been really disappointed in it. So it's like, I can empathize with that. Like, that hurts, but you were able to like pop or like take the gas out of the, shoot, what's the metaphor I'm getting for it? Like the thoughts and your stories would fuel like kind of beating yourself up, and you stopped that dead in its tracks and you moved on. And if I hadn't brought it up, you wouldn't have even been thinking of it. But I appreciate that you gave me the space to bring it up, because it was useful for all of us. And and I had one experience like in my dating life. I'm 30 and single. Well, and this was years ago. I had a first date and it went amazing. And even the servers, like, you guys are going to stand the test of time. Can you believe that? And then like a date or so later, she immediately, like with no reason, was like, I can't do this. And so that happens. And so the mindset that you shared would be useful in a context like that as well. So, okay. Yeah. I know we don't have
and the disappointment is, just for clarity, is okay. This is not about preventing or pushing the disappointment down or fighting the disappointment. This is just accepting and observing it. And you'll find that when you get good at this, and again, I'm a beginner at this, you'll find that when you get better at this, you'll find that it has a very short shelf life if you observe it. It's almost like the metaphor that I like to use is that I try to imagine that I'm standing on a balcony and I'm sort of looking down on it. And I'm just like studying it very carefully. I even do this when I run.
Yeah.
Like sometimes when I run and I'm doing like harder, like what I call hill repeats, running up a hill, I will study the pain. I'll observe the pain. Like, oh, that's interesting. I'm beating, my right knee is hurting like a little bit. That's sort of interesting. What you realize is even crazy when you're working out, is it sort of like the pain sort of dissipates when you observe it. I don't know what the reason is for that, but it's sort of like you start thinking about something else, versus if you're reacting like, oh my God, my knee, your knee's going to hurt more. Oh my God, they canceled. You're going to ruin your whole day.
Yes.
Just because someone canceled at 10 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't mean it has to ruin your day. The day has 4 quarters, a morning, mid-morning, lunch, and an evening. You can simply begin again, as Sam Harris says. You can simply sort of drop back and observe, and you can simply begin again. And again, that's the sort of muscle to work there.
I love that. Okay. I want to get back into cold calling. Okay. There's cheesy expression, cold calling is king, right? Or people say cold calling is still the best method to get meetings. I just want to get your take on that, because we have the cold call, we have the cold email, we have LinkedIn now. Some people use Vidyard. I don't know about that, but I'm curious, do you think cold calling is still the most effective method to pique curiosity and get a meeting?
Not if your prospect doesn't have a phone.
Good point. Can you expand a little more on that?
So there's a lot of people that you can't reach on the phone.
Fair enough. Okay.
So there's a lot of people. So this has nothing to do with the medium. So there's calling, there's emailing, there's videos, there is holograms, there's pictures, there's images. What I see the biggest obstacle is people are trying to sell car wash buckets to people that have car wash buckets. What I mean by that is, if you're trying to sell a solution to people that already have solutions, it doesn't matter what the medium is. You're going to hear, I'm not interested, we have a vendor, all day. So getting back to the beginning of our podcast, we have to have an understanding of the person, the job they're trying to get done specifically, how they're getting the job done today, and the terrible, no good, very bad thing that happens if they keep using the current solution. Most sellers that I speak to can't pass that test that I call the infomercial test. So you're in the kitchen making tomatoes with a knife. Let's watch the person making tomatoes. They're making tomato caprese salad. There they go, slicing the tomatoes. And as we can see, the knife is kind of dull. So watch what happens when it slices into the tomato. It's kind of like splats the tomato. And it's not really a clean cut, so it doesn't really look how it looks on the plate. It's kind of like weird. Like the seeds are all over the place. The plate looks messy. And then look at that mess they have to clean up afterwards. And they're having their friends over. It's going to be a little embarrassing. right? You saw that visually in your head, a mental movie. Most sellers can't do that. When you do the test with them, they're like, well, we help you optimize your supply chain with our new database, 360-degree view. That's very fuzzy. Once you have an understanding of what's broken and what their options are and how you might help them make a change for the better, every channel can work if you can reach people on that channel. So there is no king channel. It's where is the prospect and what is the message and how do you communicate that message in a way that doesn't come across as someone wanting to put their shield up.
So you've given myself and the whole audience a handful of paradigm shifts today. I asked a certain question thinking it would go one way, but you kind of flipped it on its head and opened up a whole new way to look at things. So, and that is an example of that. Now, I wanted to hit on how you might think about starting the first 10 or 15 seconds of a cold call, because we talked about the poke the bear method. We'll talk a little bit more on objection handling, but you already hit on it. How do you actually, like, when someone answers, like, what might you say?
So how you sound is far more important than what you say. And there's no shortage of cold call openers, but I'll just demonstrate it for you.
Okay.
So I'm going to say the same thing in two different ways.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, my name is Josh. We've never spoken before, but I was hoping you could help me out for a minute. You got a second?
Sorry, I'm busy.
Say this, now I'm going to say the same thing. Hey, Chris, my name is Josh. We've never spoken before. I was hoping you could help me out for a moment.
Yeah.
So same exact thing.
Yeah.
But the tonality is a little different because the intent is different. Hey, Chris, you are probably going to hate me because this is a cold call. Would you like to hang up or roll the dice? You feeling lucky today? A little more playful.
That was a really good one. I mean, they were all good.
But it's not good. It has to feel good for you.
Yeah.
You know, it has to feel good for you. I prefer, you know, a great cold call that I got last week or 2 weeks ago from a real estate agent. Hey, Josh, my name is Matt. I'm a local agent in Boca. Calling about the home on Marbella Drive. Do you still own it? Yeah, I do. Josh, you're probably aware that the homes in your neighborhood are in high demand. I don't suppose you're looking to sell it anytime soon? And I said, I'm not, which I'm sure he hears all the time. I really like it here. And then he said this. Listen how brilliant this line was. Sounds like that's your forever home. And my desire to correct kicked in. I'm like, well, I wouldn't say forever home. He goes, no, I would love to live in the mountains, but I went into this whole shenanigans about why I can't move right now. And then he said, look, I get it. From time to time, I send out comps, you know, what the homes are worth in your neighborhood. If you'd like, I could put shit to the list so you can see what's available. I said, sure. Now I'm on his list. And every once in a while I get email from him. And when I am ready to sell, I will think of him, but that's another opener, not permission-based. But hey, Josh, my name is Matt. I'm calling about the Inside Selling podcast. Do you still produce that? That's another kind of an opener. Here's another kind of an opener. Hey, Chris, my name is Josh. We've never spoken before. First time I caught you. I was hoping to speak with you for a moment. Do you got a second? All right. So again, pick the one that feels good for you. There's no magic one. The intent and the tonality matters more than the opener. And this is just based on cold calling for 20 years and working with a lot of people. You can have the same rep using the same opener, completely different vibes because of intent. One intent is, I got to get through the opener. I got to get the sale. The other intent is, I'm indifferent.
Detached, like we talked about before, and you slow down. You're not talking fast, and your pitch is not high. You're almost talking from a chest voice, and it's comforting. It's the red flag that come up. There's no pressure. And so, by the way, wow, we have like a minute left. Do you have a hard stop? I'm going to ask on behalf of the audience, can you do 5 more minutes? If not, it's totally fine.
Sure. No problem.
Okay. We'll rapid fire because this has been incredible. Okay. So with objections, I've been studying your flashcards and I noticed a couple principles, and correct me if I'm wrong, but diffuse, discover, discuss. And I know there's like no silver bullet, but those seem to be like a couple concepts I extracted. Could you just hit on those at a high level? Because I noticed you even for diffuse, you have a couple expressions or variations. So yeah, I'd love to. go through
So
those.
we'll just go through an example. So just one that's easy for people to sort of understand. So imagine it's 2010.
Yep.
And you are selling iPods. Now in 2010, your viewers might be a little young to remember this, but like we talked about before, if you're going to be calling people that run with portable music players, nobody was sitting around doing nothing. They were using a Diamond Rio, a Nomad device, maybe a CD player. And so again, we have to understand how are people getting the job done today and have a point of view about what the problem might be with the current way. Now, I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but back in 2009, before the iPod, do you know what the potential problem was with traditional portable music players like the Creative Diamond?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay, so back then, those devices only held 30 minutes of music.
Okay.
Now, that's not a problem if you only have 15 minutes of music. But if you're a runner like me and you ran for like an hour, what ended up happening was you have to listen to the same songs on repeat, or you would wait for that time to change out the music, which never happened because it was such a pain in the ass. So if I were to cold call you and I were to say, hey, Chris, my name is Josh. We've never met. Saw you running, familiar with you through the Boca Tri group. Do you got a second? Sure. So Chris, when you go running, are you using like a CD player, a Creative Nomad, or like a Diamond Rio? You might say, I'm using like a Diamond Rio. I might lean into that. That's a great player. They pretty much paved the way for portable music players. That dial makes it like really easy to switch tracks. What's been your take on it? We might stay there for a while, right? So there's no objection coming up here because I'm bringing it up, the quote unquote objection anyway. I'm bringing up that I'm going to presuppose that you're already using this. I'm going to take a guess. If not, they'll correct me. And then I'll say, what's your opinion of the iPod? Now, one of two things are going to happen here. They're going to be like, what is that? To which I'm going to say, well, with an iPod, you can run for 10 hours, not repeating the same songs with a 10-hour battery life. How does it work? If you'd like, I can show you. Or, I looked into the iPod. Oh, it sounds like the value wasn't there for you, right? So what I'm doing is I am bringing up the quote unquote objections. Now, the word objection, I really have talked about this before. I don't like the word.
Okay.
I call it like resistance. Resistance is a natural part of the cold call. And when you hear the word objection, you think you have to overcome it. What I'm suggesting here is we're just going to bring it up proactively. So you will never hear we're using a vendor for that if you, at the beginning of the cold call, bring up the vendors. So Josh, most of the time when people use producing podcasts, they're using a couple tools like a StreamYard, Adobe Logic, and sometimes like a Headliner to promote it. What tools are you using to edit and promote your podcast today? I'm using X, Y, and Z. Oh, what's your opinion of the script? What is that? Well, with the script, you can edit podcasts like Word docs. So you don't have to go in there and edit waveforms. Well, what do you mean? How does it work? If you'd like, I can show you. Or, I looked into the script. Oh, sounds like it was too expensive for you. Well, it wasn't that. It was X. Well, I looked into the iPod and it wasn't for me because I have a Windows machine. And then you could say, well, that was the case, but now it's available on a Mac. Right. So again, it's coming from a place of curiosity and understanding rather than this approach of overcoming.
Yes. So 2 more questions and I'll hit my quota for this time around. And I really hope to have you on again in the future. This has been amazing. We got a good live audience. You draw a crowd, Josh. So, okay. Cold emailing. There may be a couple questions nested within it, but we have to hit on it, right? It's a great tool. I had got one of your resources at one point about irresistible subject lines, which was so cool. Obviously, that's key to opening it up. And then there's like the body of the email. So maybe if you could throw out a nugget or two on how to think about a good subject line, and then maybe a nugget on how to write like a solid email that might pique some curiosity.
So subject lines are contextual.
Okay.
Meaning it depends on what you're writing. So one subject line that I got said Iron Man Cozumel. Said inside selling podcast, right? That's going to be contextual. I was doing an Ironman Cozumel race. It was an Ironman race. I'm going to open that. It's relevant, right? And then it said, Josh, it looks like you signed up for Ironman Cozumel. So all cold emails need to start with context. Why are you selecting this person versus any other person? It's a principle called social loafing. You can Google this if you want to geek out on it. But people are more likely to respond when they feel more unique to respond. So, Josh, looks like you signed up for Ironman Cozumel. Now we have to relate something to that. That means that you're probably spending 20 hours a week training. Right? That's an observation we have to make. Now we have to talk about what changes for the better after. Age groupers are using TriDot to ensure that the last 6 miles of their run don't turn into a Frankenstein walk, but with only 5 hours of training a week. It involves a stress test score to make sure you're not overtraining. No more divorce by triathlon. Worth taking a look. All right. So again, it's a perspective on what terrible, no good, very bad thing happens if they keep doing what they're doing, which is divorce by triathlon, and a perspective on the opposite, what they could be doing differently. So in this case, instead of 20 hours, you could be training 5 hours a week and getting the same result. Again, there is no like magical subject line. The context matters. That said, my guy, John Bouchon, had a really good one. No, I think it said like blatant sales pitch, or the audacity of this email. Like these things that are like vanilla, a lot of people use them, so they're not as effective. It's better to be contextual. So inside selling podcast question, Ironman Cozumel question, those kind of things.
That is so useful. Just keep it contextual and personal. And I liked your call to action at the end. It wasn't aggressive, but you were opening up a conversation. So speaking of conversations, Cheesy, this has been amazing. I got one more question for you, and that's it. There's a million more I could ask. You've built an incredible brand where you're bringing a lot of value to folks like me. And quick plug, a shameless plug that's not shameless, is follow Josh on LinkedIn, guys, if you aren't already. He's always putting out free content and articles that are uplifting and elevating and insightful. And so can you speak to what it takes to build a brand where you're bringing value? And I saw something about it taking multiple years, but I'd love your thoughts on the power of building a brand and how to do it in an authentic way.
So it's 4 things. Thing number 1 is teach people about topics that make them smarter, but have a point of view.
Okay.
Meaning I can't write about things like you should carbo load before you run. That has been written about bazillions of times. So notice you have to have a perspective, a point of view, and you have to be able to teach that point of view in a way that is going to make someone smarter about a topic they care about. The next thing is storytelling. So I collect stories all the time in notes on my Apple phone. Every day, something I read, I listen to, and then I write how I could relate that to a sales lesson. So the dog park thing, something that happened to me, I write that down. I'm like, here's the lesson. So I'm collecting stories all the time. And then the third unlock is consistency and patience. So I have been posting daily for 3 years. So most people don't fail at building a quote unquote brand on LinkedIn. They're just not patient enough. It takes, some years to sort of get the flywheel going of being consistent and having a point of view, and then entertaining people. So the stuff with my wife is all meant to entertain. I could teach that same concept without involving my wife, but sometimes it's fun to turn the camera on her and turn it into a lesson. So making people feel something and entertain them is the fourth and final piece.
You know what? I am grateful for your commitment over 3 years, because it served me. It served everyone in this audience. And Thanks for inspiring us, because who knows, there could be someone in the audience. There's 12 people live right now, and more people see it, who becomes a content creator thanks to you. So I know you're detached from the outcome, Josh, but I did want to finish with some calls to action. I want to encourage the audience to check out your newsletter, your Badass B2B Growth Guide, Poke the Bear Cold Calling Method, Tongue-Tied Sales Objections, and Inside Selling Podcast. I linked all of those things in the description of the video, and I've got a lot of value myself. So Josh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And to the audience, to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks Josh.